All right, here we go. We are live. Let me get my hat right. We're with the amazing Mr. Shannon Heaton. He has been, he was, what was it, USA Wrestling Magazine Writer of the Year in 2019. He started writing in Iowa. Then he supplanted here to Florida. He's been doing North Florida Matmen since, I believe, 2013, but he started covering wrestling back in 1988. He covers over 125 teams between North Florida and Georgia. And you guys probably know him as North Florida Matmen. He gives us everything North Florida, and he's here with us today, Mr. Shannon Heaton. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. I don't mind. It's been a while trying to figure out. It's like, okay, how do I get on the show? What cameras am I going to break being on the show?
Yeah.
I think I do a little better than Brant does, but
Yeah, well, if I haven't broken,
try not to talk too much.
Good. And I was happy to have you on because I know that we have messaged back and forth before, and I was telling my wife earlier, I'm like, I've tried to get him on, but he's always really busy. So if I say, okay, I got a Tuesday, he's like, well, I don't even have time to shake your hand on a Tuesday, right? I'm like, I can't get him on. And then when you reached out after Brant and found out I do some night stuff, it was refreshing. I was happy to get you on because it's good to know you.
Well, hat tip to Brant because he told me that you did nighttime interviews, and I thought you were exclusively daytime only, and the stuff you were running at night was just other stuff you were taping during the day, and you just released it at night. So he told me that.
Sometimes I'll pre-record. Sometimes now I'll pre-record if I'm having some issues with this, or now, as you're familiar with, I'm getting out to events now. It's very difficult to go live to do an interview out there unless you've got like the whole professional system where I've got a place to sit down with a computer. Then you got to hope that the Wi-Fi or the internet is good enough or strong enough. So I've tried, but it kind of gets a little grainy. So I'll do interviews when I'm out, but I'll wait and I'll just post them later. But for the most part, I've had to change my time slots a lot because with quarantine, it didn't matter what time it was. I mean, everybody in the world was home, so everybody was willing to come on, right? But now I've made adjustments. But I always tell people, look, if you see my time slots and they don't work for you, just get a hold of me, and if I can figure out a way to slide into a time slot that works for you,
right,
we'll do it. And now that I can leave the house, I have a car, so I can drive places and stuff. So that's definitely been good for me. And Facebook is working. We're
Sweet.
here. I see it. I had a gentleman on earlier. I don't know why it wasn't doing it, but we're great. But again, I'm here with Shannon Heaton, and we're just going down a rabbit hole because we're two people that like to talk, and we're doing that. But first of all, what you do is amazing. I'm glad that I had no idea until I got into all this. I found all these groups, and all I was doing in wrestling was watching my kid wrestle. But now I get to learn a lot from you and Brant and everybody that covers it, Jason at Southeast Wrestle. But what's cool to me is that you're kind of like me. You've never wrestled before, right?
Correct. Yeah. My actual wrestling background was a gym unit my freshman year of high school, and they paired us off. We had the wrestling coach in the room, and I'm sure he was probably looking for some backup kids to start filling out his JV lineup and whatever. And I end up getting paired with the varsity 145. He throws me on my back in 4 seconds. The lights, and I'm like, oh, that's what they look like in here. And I think it's kind of funny when everybody always says, look up at the lights. And I'm like, yeah, my one time I did, and it was fun. And I didn't even like wrestlers that much when I was in high school. I think that might have had something to do with it, but my opinion changed in college for sure.
And I can share this on North Florida Matmen, right?
Sure.
The video has made it.
Yes.
Approved. All right, I'm doing that. But yeah, it's funny you say the lights thing because I took my son to Appalachian State last summer when we could do those things, and he was just getting hammered and he was getting a little frustrated. But the coach in the room said, "Hey, a lot of people will tell you that the only thing they remember from this room is the lights, but they're doing great now. They're in college, they're wrestling, they're doing well." And he said, "So don't worry, you're not the first kid to only look up at the lights." So he's been coming along since then. But yeah, so from never wrestling to deciding that it's a sport that you're passionate about and you love, and you start covering. Obviously, you graduated from a school that, if nobody knows, he graduated from a school that's pretty good at wrestling. It's called Iowa. So
Yes, it is the national powerhouse of collegiate wrestling in America. There are no substitutions. The current iteration that is in blue and white and happens to be in Pennsylvania. They had quite a bit of help from a collegian who also happened to train in Iowa and was heavily influenced by the Iowa coaching staff. So I am quite passionate about my Iowa fandom, but I found that since I started Matmen, that I actually don't have that much time to follow Division I wrestling, and people want to hit me up about it, and I am and go, "Did you see Spencer Lee do this or that?" And I'm like, "No." "Really? How could you not see it?" I'm like, "Well, I'm writing stories about your kids and so on." So
now, what about that wrestling team that Brant Parsons likes?
Well, again, I would have to say, given that their head coach is an Iowa graduate and cut his teeth with the finest coach of wrestling in the land. I have a funny story. I don't think we'd have time for it in this podcast about the first time I met Dan Gable. Interviewed him probably 4 or 5 times in the 80s and 90s, but the first time was rather odd circumstances. In fact, we might have to share that one at state, maybe outside the recorded interview process, because it was quite interesting.
With a beer or a Coke?
I'm sorry?
With a beer or a Coke, right?
Actually, it wasn't. It was just the time of morning that he pounded on my high school friend's apartment's door looking for one of his wrestlers who happened to live in the building. And it was like 6:30 in the morning. We'd been up all night. We were probably not engaged in, the most healthiest of choices at that time. And Gable pounds on the door at 6:30 in the morning. He's looking, I can't even remember what kid he was looking for. To me, when I say kid, I'm thinking of somebody like Alger or Brad Penrith or, maybe one of the Heffernans or Zaleskis, because that's who were the collegians at the time at Iowa. And we were just like, "Oh, hey, coach, what's going on?" Like it was the most normal thing in the world that the legend of Iowa wrestling was knocking on the door looking for one of his kids.
And now we
and he just got the Medal of Freedom a couple days ago.
And would the president say, I may have small hands, but I think I can take you, or something like that? And not really.
Don't think I'm familiar exactly with what the president said to Dan, but
it was something like, "I think I can take you down," and Gable was like, "I don't think so."
Yeah, I'm extremely pleased, of course, that Dan Gable was recognized with the Medal of Freedom. It's the highest civilian honor that an American citizen can receive outside of the military, and it's well deserved and has been long deserved, I think, for what Coach Gable has done for the sport.
What's amazing to me about Iowa alum that I've met, and I'll tell you another person I met not on my show, but most people, like if you talk to an Ohio State guy, the discussion is their football team, right? Or you talk to a Florida Gator or a Florida State or anywhere in the country, it's like, "Man, how's your football team? Did your football?" Any student, even if they didn't play the sport, it's about football, right? Or basketball. We go to a dermatologist. I take my kid to a dermatologist, I don't know, a year ago, and we walk in, and I don't know how it came up, but he figures out that Daniel wrestles. And all of a sudden, the dermatologist and Daniel are talking for like 40 minutes. And I'm like, "Oh my God, what just happened?" He is an alum of Iowa. He goes, "You wrestle? Well, let me tell you, do you know what school I came from? Do you know who has the best wrestling in the country? Do you know who is the top? Iowa." That's where I came from. Let's talk about some matches I saw. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Right? So they get into this big passionate conversation, and I'm thinking, oh man. But yeah, that was awesome.
Well, I
Um,
started doing a little bit of coverage of the Iowa teams of the late 80s, early 90s with my newspapering that I was doing at the time. Um, and, but it was always kind of in a backup capacity for quite some while. But it was really going to both the field house in Iowa City first, and then later Carver Hawkeye Arena, where I really figured it out about what wrestling means to its fans. And it takes you places that you have never expected that you thought you would go. And I never expected to be living here covering wrestling here. But I am. And it's because of how it all started back in the late 80s.
yeah, and then you spent 4 years back there covering it, and then you got back into it in 2000, 2011 in Iowa, right?
I covered at that time in 2000. I was covering Illinois and Iowa high schools for local newspapers in the Iowa and Illinois Quad Cities. And I always just say that's 3 hours west of Chicago. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I know where that is. I covered it for 10, 11 years. I won a couple of awards while I was there. And I reconnected with a college girlfriend and decided to move here to Jacksonville because that's where she was living and teaching at the time. And I really thought I was done with wrestling because I wanted to just, you know, as I was in my 40s at the time, and I just wanted to just be with her at work and hang out with her and do stuff and not have wrestling be in the way. So I actually retired from the sport. And, you know, obviously you're familiar now that you've been in it for a while, you know that wrestlers retire by leaving their wrestling shoes on the center of the mat. Well, I'm at the state duels for Iowa in 2011 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, which is a frequent home for the Division III national tournament. Everything's done. My teams have finished where they finished. One of them won a title, I believe. The other one was second. And I finished all my writing, sent it all to my paper, and everything was good to go. So I took a pen and I took a notebook and I walked out to the center of one of the mats and I just left the pen and the notebook on the mat. And I took a picture of it and I posted it on Facebook when I got back to the Quad Cities. It was about an hour and a half away after I drove back. And I just said, you know, I figured everybody would know what that meant, and they did. And you know, people were not happy in my home area to see me leave because wrestling hasn't been covered the same since. I'm not going back though because I have a about on ice. I don't like them. I shoveled a lot of it in my.
Well, it seems like you've really rooted
teenager.
yourself. It seems like you've really rooted yourself here too. I mean, with over 120 teams that you're covering, and it's kind of cool how it started. And it seems like you've always been kind of a niche writer. It seems like when I look back, I say niche, but like you've never said, okay, I'm going to take on the whole entire state or the whole region or the whole country. You're like, okay, I like this area. That's where I'm going to go. And then that area just kind of expands. And you did the same thing here. You were in the Jacksonville, Tallahassee area. And then next thing you knew, you were coming into North Florida. And the next thing you knew, you were into DeLand. And now and next thing you knew, you had 96 Florida teams that you were covering.
That niche writing, I would say, is probably a very good way to define what I do. When I came here and I started the site in 2013, I basically covered the teams that my daily newspaper was supposed to cover and did not. And that was essentially Duval County, St. Johns County, Clay County, Nassau, and then Columbia in Lake City, which was a team that you saw last weekend when you were at Lake Gibson. And then I picked up Sewanee in Live Oak. And that was it for the first year. And we grew a little bit. We added some teams from the Gainesville area. We picked up Flagler Palm Coast. We picked up Palatka. And I was starting to develop relationships with coaches from the Tally area. And because they would be coming to tournaments that I was at, and they were like, we'd really like you to cover us too. So in 2015, I started what was then called Northwest Florida Matmen. And it was a northern site for the western side. It was Panhandle, it was Tallahassee, and not about Jacksonville and the Clay County teams.
No, that was the one that you took all the way almost into Alabama, right?
Right, yes, all the way to the Alabama line, yes. And a couple years after that, I just decided it was too much work to maintain two websites, so I just combined them to one. And then it was North Florida Matmen, and it covers all of Region 1 for 2A and 1A, half a part of district of Region 1 and 3A, and then a couple of teams in District 5 in 1A. Then we had reclassification, and then we picked up, there were teams from, dang it, it's the county's escaping me, but it's basically the Ocala area. And then, of course, we picked up teams in Volusia County. So that's your Daytonas. So we added them last year. And in the meantime, I'd had a parent who was a former Flagler Cone Coast parent move up to Brunswick, Georgia. And he pitched me on the idea of starting a South Georgia site. I didn't really want to do it because I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. But at the same time, I don't back down from challenges. I've kind of learned that from this sport, but for me, it's in a writing context. I write like a wrestler prepares, like a wrestler practices. I'm very detail oriented, and I am a niche writer, like you said. And so we started South Georgia Matmen, and we've been kind of playing around a little bit with the coverage area there. It's been a little hit and miss a little bit, but this year I've liked the group I have this year. So I
you know what you need to do? Start a Florida Mat Woman.
Well, I cover girls. In fact, I will be at Pop Leaders tournament on Saturday, and I'm hoping to actually have live presence at Girls State.
Yeah, I was messaging with Miss Reese this evening, and I said, I know you're seeing me post events a lot, and I'm trying to have that voice. And obviously, she knows how much I've been trying to promote girls. I've had 60 girls on or 70 girls on, and I've taken plenty of pictures. And I try and do my part, but I can't find the tournaments. I can't find the listings. I can find the rankings, the top 5 or whatever, but there's a lot of tournaments that are happening that you just don't know about. And so I reached out to her and I'm like, hey, whenever you guys are traveling somewhere or doing something, give me a heads up, because I am right now, my kids wrestle. So I happen to be at tournaments and they happen to be all boys because my 2 boys are boys. So
right.
That's where I'm at, right? But I don't want to forget about them, and I don't want to forget how important they are, and I don't want to forget how awesome they are to be. And I want to go to some of their tournaments that I'm available to go to. So, but she was saying that, Florida doesn't really have that group, that Facebook group that to cover women properly, right? So, yeah, a Mat Woman would be a great.
That's an idea. I mean, I think that, I was asked by a parent at Clay about ranking girls and doing a girls ranking. And I said that for the North, right now, there just are not enough girls to do a very job that honors the effort of the girls by doing rankings, because there's still the numbers in the North are not what they are in the central area. I mean, you don't have teams that are 20, 30 deep like Dr. Phillips or a Freedom, in the North. I mean, most girls teams that are even full teams are looking at probably 10 to 12 girls. So right now I'm kind of waiting to see how sanctioning next year changes things up. Maybe we will do a Mat Women. Maybe we'll do a separate page on the Mat Men site, because that's the reason I call my site Mat Men, is because I did a lot of work in Illinois for a site that was called Illinois Mat Men. I basically was doing for them kind of what I helped Brant do. I was getting them a lot of results from my area, which was an area they were kind of struggling with because a lot of them were either from the Chicago area or later on they were from the Peoria area and really didn't get results from the Northwest where I was. So that's kind of where we kind of went with that. I wanted to honor the guys who had founded the Illinois Matmen site by calling my site Matmen down here. There's not a formal connection. You know, I've been pitched a couple times on formalizing some connections with people up north. Never really worked out just because honestly, I am not a business person. I play one on TV, but I am not a business person. And probably miss opportunities.
You and I both.
that I would otherwise have.
Yeah, I think behind every man is a good woman. I got a good one. So she makes sure that I don't know how to do it, but she'll make sure I'm not doing anything wrong. But you know, something that I really want to pride myself on, and right now I've been able to get out and about. You know, it'll be nice if I can start maybe making a little name for myself where I'm also able to get invited to like just a Tuesday night duel or a Friday night duel like you do. Right now I'm able to get into some of these tournaments that my kids aren't involved in. Hey, can I come down? Yeah, come on, right? But something that I told myself I really want to get out and about once I was allowed to, and something I read about you is it's so important for you to make sure you're out at 2, 3, 4 of these a week and really making your presence felt. Not just because you like wrestling, but and you're right about it, but you really have to. The coaches have to trust you. The coaches have to believe that you believe in the sport, that you love it. And you said that was the way that now I rarely have to ask for anything. You get what you need immediately to write your stories. You know, what, you know, how important is it for you to be present?
My first year, I mean, I work in logistics. I have a logistics job and I do work in logistics that my college training allows me to do. And when I came here, as I mentioned briefly that I covered the schools. I wanted to cover the schools that the newspaper in my hometown wasn't covering. They are doing it now, but it's mainly because I'm doing it for them. But they weren't covering the sport. I would never see box scores in the paper, and I was a subscriber because I believe in daily newspapers. And I would be looking. There would be no wrestling in the paper, even though it was wrestling season. I knew it was going on because I took a trip out with my then girlfriend in 2012, and we went to a Highland Games event out in Clay County, and we happened to drive by Clay High School, and they had a marquee going with a couple of kids that had won state titles that year. So I'm like, oh, so there's wrestling out here, and it's obviously good if they're state champs, but it wasn't ever in the paper. So the funny thing is, I want to take a moment, if I can, and give a shout out on the origin story because it matters to me.
You can take as long as you like.
Okay, I'll try to not go too long, but
I'm enjoying myself.
My son's junior year, not my youngest, but my third son, who's now back up in Illinois. My third son was going to high school at Mandarin in Jacksonville, on the south side, and his government teacher was a wrestling coach, and they started talking about wrestling because my son knew or recognized that his government teacher was a coach, and he started talking about me to the coach about that. Hey, my dad used to cover wrestling up north, and so the wrestling coach at the time, whose name was Larry Heaton, invited me to come out and cover a district tournament, and this was February 2013. Now, I really thought I was retired at that point. So I go out there with my two boys. They're still young enough to go. One of them was in 5th grade at the time, and then my other one was a junior. And they aren't that interested in wrestling, so they're just kind of like they're there for the snacks and the food. You know, they pretty much leave the old man to his devices.
Chase each other under the stands.
Right, yeah, exactly. So I go, and there's teams, and they're competing, and it was pretty good and whatnot. I'm looking around, there weren't that many fans. you know, and there was several teams from Jacksonville, and there was this team from Gainesville that was there, and you know, it was all well and good. But there was this team in green and gold that was just knocking the stuffing out of everybody there, and that was my first exposure to Fleming Island. And they were not then what they are now. In terms, they were good, but they were not the best team in the area at that point. They were climbing. You know, now they are pretty much unquestionably the best team in the North and have been for the last few years.
Oh yeah, and they have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 ranked guys on their team. So
Right. So they win district big, and I was like, "Oh, that was fun. I enjoyed that." And then I thought, you know what? Because I know, you know, when you're in postseason that, you know, one level of tournament progresses to another. So I started doing some research on the computer, and I'm like, okay, there's a region tournament the next weekend, and it's at this place called Bowles. And you know, I barely knew where Bowles was. I drove by it several times. You know, it looked pretty nice from the outside. I mean, there aren't schools like Bowles in Illinois and Iowa, I can tell you that. And so I decide I'm going to go, and I'm paying to go to this one. I paid admission to go in. I had no press pass. I had nothing. I walk in with a notebook. I paid admission, and I get a bracket, and I start filling it out. And this was the second day of the tournament. And there's this school on one side that I kind of sat near, and it was all the clay people. And then across the way on the other side of the gym, these just raucously loud yelling people, and they're yelling at the clay kids and the clay fans, and the clay fans are giving it back to them. And that was Wakulla. And that was my first exposure to Wakulla back in 2013. And I'm like, okay, there's something here, and nobody's writing about it up here. What's going on? And by the end of the weekend, I'm like, well, I'm going to write about this. And so I reached out to this radio station that had a website, because they occasionally would solicit high school content. So I just wrote him a story and sent it to him. Here you go. And I didn't ask for any money, and I didn't get any. But you know, I wrote a story for them about states the following weekend. I didn't go, but you know, I could follow along with the brackets on the website. And by that point, I'm like, I need to do something. Nobody's covering this sport up here. And you know, I'm just the sort of person that I like, if I see a need and I feel like I can meet it, I'm going to meet it. And so Matmen was born that year. We decided to launch, and we launched in September of 2013, and here we are. And we're still going. And you know, the girlfriend is no longer here, but I'm still in the town. And you know, we're in a situation now. I mean, in these uncertain times of the pandemic, I could do probably my work anywhere. But as it stands right now, I'm choosing to stay. And the main reason I'm choosing to stay is because of Matmen.
well, you guys just, and I don't know if you wrote a story on it, but I know there's a young man up there that just had a ribbon cutting for his new wrestling room up there by the NAC. And this young man was shot 7 times during a terrorist attack at the Naval NAC. And
Yes, he's over in the Panhandle. Yes.
What an amazing story that is. And I'm into one of his buddies. I don't know if he knows it yet, but one of his buddies called me, was like, hey, we got to get this guy on, man. He's a hell of a man. And you know me, all you got to do is ask, right? But he told me the story, and I was reading about it. But did you make it up there for that? Are you for you? I'm sure.
No, that's too far for me to go. The Gulf Breeze area is at least 6-hour drive for me.
But I'm sure you're familiar with the story and everything.
Oh yeah. Yes, I am. And it's relatively recent that they just opened the training facility. So, you know, I hope it goes well, because one thing about the Panhandle is that they've got competitive kids. They are in some ways where Jacksonville was 6-7 years ago. You know, but they're so isolated. They pretty much have to stay geographically, particularly now. So you don't really see a whole lot of Panhandle teams wrestling outside of their area and kind of southeastern Alabama.
Everything's so far from them.
Everything is so far from them. Yes, exactly right. Right.
But yeah, when this coach called me and he was talking to me about it, I was like, wait a second, forget wrestling. Tell me about this man. Like, wow, that's unbelievable. I mean, he
Yeah.
grabbed these kids, he grabbed the people in his office, he jumped out the back window after he had been shot 7 times and just to save everybody because the guy was coming back and to be a year later rolling on the mat and opening up your own place. I don't know if he'll ever hear this, but God bless you, my friend. God bless you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a unbelievable story of courage.
Yeah.
Really.
The one other thing that I wanted to ask you about, and I think this is really cool that the kids that leave North Florida and proceed to wrestle, proceed to wrestle in college. That's my after 9 p.m. English. Uh, you still stay in touch with them and you actually bring stories back to the community on how they're doing and how well they're doing and what they're doing and that's pretty neat. And what started that?
Well, my first, the first year, um, I, I'm indebted to basically four people, really and truly, for different reasons. For the first year launch, Larry Heaton is the number one guy, the Mandarin coach, who believed in me when I didn't believe that this could be done. But there were three people also who were really influential. One of them was Travis Cunningham, who was kind of it's a weird situation. They've had coaches who were not necessarily, they were the head coaches at Fleming Island, but PJ was really kind of running the show. PJ Covert, who is now fully the head coach, and really was the de facto head coach for a few years, even in my first couple of years with the site. So Travis was one. He was really helpful. And then there were a couple of younger people. One is now coaching at a club in St. Johns County. His name is Jared Langdo. He was a Creekside graduate, and he believed in me because he would retweet everything I wrote, and he would talk about it to all his Creekside teammates. And we had a really nice base started in St. Johns County because of Jared. And then the fourth guy is a guy named Zach Fox, who was kind of involved with Bishop Kenny at the time as an assistant coach. And he had wrestled at Ridgeview, and his brother had wrestled at both Ridgeview and University Christian and won a state title. And his brother went on to Brant's favorite college. I have to say it because Brant will harass me if I don't. The Ohio State University for his undergrad. And he was in the room, stayed in the room for 5 years. And, now I believe he's working on his MD. I believe it was in orthopedics. But it was hanging around Zach all the time and Zach telling me what his brother Josh was going to be doing that led me to start what I call the next level notebook. And that's essentially just me surfing around college program websites and finding results and writing about them. And, I think it's important to tell these kids when they go to college that they haven't been forgotten back home, because they don't have the same kind of fans in terms of numbers at an NAIA tournament. I've been to a couple. I've seen a couple of college level meets and whatnot, and they do get some fans, but it's not what they were used to in high school, and it's not like the 10,000-12,000 that go to an Iowa Penn State duel. Okay?
Yeah.
So
do you have the interview up? Do you have our interview up right now?
no, I don't actually.
So Brant Parsons just posted, I do love proper usage of words. The Ohio State University is factually correct.
I'm afraid I wouldn't have gotten access. He would have cut off access to his stuff if I didn't attribute. So, but yeah, they're going into wrestling for 20 to 40 people, maybe 100 people. And, it's at the college level. My son's an athlete at his college. It's more of a job than it is anything else. It's really hard to be a college athlete. And I just want them to know that, and I want them to remember that we didn't forget about them just because they were now wrestling in Nebraska, or they're wrestling in, they're wrestling now at West Point, or they're wrestling, even for Kaiser or for Southeastern. I just want them to know that they still matter to me, even after they've graduated from high school, which is my primary focus.
Nice, nice. And now that you're into Georgia, Life U. So I know we're in the second week of our Florida wrestling season down here. Last week was the first week being open. Thank you, FHSAA, for letting us do that. And then I was talking on the cell phone today with a coach down in South Florida, and I said, this is going to sound selfish and self-centered and all of the above, but I'm kind of glad you guys don't have wrestling, because you're all up here wrestling and I get to see it. Because I said, man, I've been watching all these teams from down south. They're not wrestling, so they're coming up to Central Florida and Lakeland and Tampa and North Florida, and they're so close. And I get to go watch them. And I tell people all the time, and I was at, we saw Palmetto Ridge and we saw American Heritage last week, and we got to see a 1 and 2 matchup this weekend at the Danny Byron, because the South Dade duels aren't happening. All those teams are coming up, and I'm 15 minutes from Osceola High School, so I'm going there. And I want to ask you, I have truly fallen in love with the sport, and even more now with the interviews that I'm learning stuff. But now my sons are wrestling also in where I'm going tomorrow, so I'll get to see them wrestle, and that's cool. But I'm more excited to see, I'm like, are these two going to match up? Are we going to get to see, let me see where I have this written at, because we got, and I know you have some North Florida teams down here, because I know when I posted my list, because I couldn't find, I put a question mark in some of those, so I know you had helped me with that. But I mean, you've got, I don't know, just at 140, just at 145 alone, there's like 4 or 5 people. But there's a lot of these brackets that we're going to see, like a who's number one. I mean, like a 1 versus 2. I mean, there's a 1 and a 2 106 in this tournament. There's a 1 and a 2, I think 138, 145, 132. I mean, there's 1s and 2s all over this tournament, and I hope to see them. Not only is there 1s and 2s, there's 3s and 4s, there's 2s and 3s, there's 5s and 6s. Like, we have a chance to really see almost like a real small version of the state tournament, and I feel like that's what we're seeing lately, because all these teams are coming in to a centralized location to be able to wrestle.
Yeah, Danny Byron has always had a few good teams. Camden comes down from Georgia, and they've usually sent a delegation. Valdosta is a team that 2 years ago won state duels in 6A, and they've gone down, and they're going to be back this year. And Fleming Island has always gone down as well. Now, we had a bit of an issue this week, because our biggest northern tournament this weekend typically is the Capital City Classic, and that tournament on Saturday night last weekend was at 16 teams. On Monday morning, I was told by the tournament director, Mike Crowder at Lincoln, on Monday morning they went to 5, and they weren't even taking all of the city schools from Tallahassee. It was basically Lincoln and Childs and Florida High, who are either serving as physical hosts or actual tournament hosts. It's the way they've always done it. This year it's different, with Florida High being the physical host, and they're bringing in Mosley and Niceville from the Panhandle, and that's it. And they're going to do, what I was told was, round robins with around 8 kids.
What took it from 16 to 5?
All I know for certain, and this is where, just a jumped up dad blogger is a little bit harder for me to get really solid info compared to what Brant can do, or even what, guys at regional newspapers can do. But all I was told was that I can only assume that it was for social distancing purposes. And, that's unfortunate. The thing for me, the thing that I think that I would say, and I appreciate very much, the idea of going to wrestling where there's great matchups, and really highlighting and showcasing the best that Florida has to offer. Because, Florida, I can tell you, when I covered wrestling in Illinois and Iowa, Florida essentially was branding, and that was it. There wasn't nobody knew about South Dade in Illinois and Iowa in the 2000s or early 2010s. That's no longer the case now, and you got to credit Vic Balmaceda for that. You got Lake Highland Prep. You got to credit Mike Palazzo for that. They're incredible coaches, and they have built their programs, from literally nothing. But for me, I really look at the kids on the teams that struggle. I hurt very much this year that we lost Florida School for the Deaf and Blind. We lost that program. To me, the most emotional thing is losing programs in my area. Florida School of the Deaf and Blind, that's a program that we could not afford to lose. And the reason we can't afford to lose a program like that is not because they won award after award and COVID took them out, or we lost that program because it's already damn hard for those kids to compete as it is. And, those kids were my heroes. And I said that about them almost every year. I noticed those kids. I noticed the seniors who graduate and they lose in the blood round of regions. Those kids, I watched them walk off mats, and it doesn't get any more emotional than that. Wrestling never gets more emotional. The highest highs are nothing compared to those kids walking off the mat, knowing their high school career is over. And in many cases, their whole wrestling career is over, because you're not going to, a lot of them aren't going to wrestle in college. Some of them will, but not all of them. The kids in programs where there's no facilities and they are struggling with violence in the inner city where they happen to be, and they're literally trying to survive, and try to make something of themselves, whether it's in Palatka or it's at Jacksonville Reigns, or it's in the heart of Tallahassee, or it's South Dade. I mean, we think of South Dade as this great program, and it is, but those kids are hungry. They are toughened up by life in ways that people like me will never understand. And, that is what I am drawn to with this sport.
And if you don't know,
great, don't get me wrong.
No, listen, I've had those guys on. I've had Omi Acosta on here. I've had the Lugos. I've had, obviously Brentley Reyna is coach, but I've had guys. I've had Alex Cotto on. I've had these South Dade kids on that will tell me, Omi being one of them, the first word I ever learned in English, he'll tell you, is wrestling. That's why the thing says lucha, because that's my first word was lucha. Right. And I've talked to other kids that say, man, if he didn't pull me off the streets and show me a wrestling room, I don't know where I'd be today. And and I finally got to meet Vic personally at the Sunshine Duels. I have never had a chance to meet him personally. He's not a guy that's going to come on my show. He's not a guy that publicly speaks about himself. He's not a guy that says, hey, look at me. Just like Walker's not that guy. I don't know how I got Basile. I was lucky to get Basile on. He's very cool. He's the same way. Palazzo's not going to come on. A lot of these guys. But what Vic's done down there, I grew up in South Florida. My dad grew up in down, and that people will tell you that there's a guy in South Dade that is making men, and he's giving people a career, and he's giving people opportunities to go to college. and it's so much bigger than wrestling. It's so much bigger than anything. Um, it's just amazing. Another great article came out in the Miami Herald about him at the beginning of this season, and he just his program, Duck Train down there with with Duck. You're right. Just everything they're doing for those kids and those families down there is insane.
Yeah, I just think that, you know, we celebrate the great matches that we get to see, and we're very lucky. And you're getting to do that yourself. We're very lucky to get to do that. You know, but for me, as you said, I'm a niche writer. You know, I get as much enjoyment seeing a kid win a match for the first time. They want a contested match for the first time. Like we talked about earlier about your son. That means a lot to me to get to see that and know what background of those kids and where they come from. To write about some kid at the end of a year and give him what I've called in the past. I called it my Heaton's hero, and I've now renamed it for a Ponte Vedra wrestler, the Xander Lauren Warrior Award. And that kid will go to his coach and go, "Wait a minute, Matmen knows who I am." That is the biggest high I can get from this sport, is showing these kids that they matter, that their work matters, that the pain and the suffering and the weight cutting and the nutrition loss and the looking at Thanksgiving dinner and it's, you know, a spoonful of potatoes and you know, maybe a baseball sized portion of turkey, you know, that all of that sacrifice that they have put in, that it matters, not just for what they're doing right now, but for the community that they're going to become a part of as men and women. They've learned the value of self-sacrifice. They've learned the value of commitment to a team and commitment to finishing what you start. And I just love that part about wrestling.
I agree. I was talking to somebody today, I think it was today or yesterday, and I said, now that I've been out like taking pictures of kids and stuff, to have a kid come up to me and just say, "Man, that was awesome. Thanks for that picture." It's like, I just got a paycheck. There's my paycheck. Or a kid private messages me and says, "Hey, thank you for those pictures. There's my paycheck." Like, it's just awesome that, because a lot of these kids, some of them, there's nobody in the stands for them. There's nobody there taking pictures for them. They're not going to get their match recorded or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's cool when that thank you comes, or even I was walking. What's weird to me now is when people like, and it's not weird. I mean, thank you everybody, but all of a sudden I'll hear, hey, thank you for what you're doing for Florida wrestling, and I'm like, what am I doing, right? And they're like, no, you're doing a lot, right?
I think the same. I think the same thing. I do. I'm just out here, an idiot with a computer and a willingness not to quit. That's all I am. I mean, I don't know any. I am the least technical person. You talked to me earlier about a 2-on-1. I'm thinking to myself, okay, what's a 2-on-1? He's talking about two hands on establishing hand control or wrist control. And I literally am the least technical person that there is.
I get in trouble all the time. My kids will just treat me like total trash. I'll say, "Hey, that was a great sprawl you had." That's not a sprawl. That's a move out and a snap down, whatever. I'm like, what do you mean? He jumped off the ground and his feet went backwards. Isn't that a sprawl? Not if you're pushing his head to the left or to the right. I'm like, I don't know. What is that? Or I'm asking the kid today, I'm like, "Hey, what's that thing you worked on where you were on the bottom and you swung out to your butt and then you hit your elbow to their elbow and came around the back?" And they're like, "A sit out, Dad?" I'm like, "Was that a sit out?" "No, it was a switch." Like, "What's a switch?" "You've never been hit with a switch, kid?" "No, that's not that switch, right?"
You get it. You understand. Yeah. I mean, I picked up some things now, but I'm still, when people start getting, technical about how they want to set up opponents for, and I'm just kind of nodding my head going, It's like, you're brilliant. And but what I really want to know is how did you feel at the end when you got the fall?
Yeah. Well,
That's what I'm after.
when I started coming out, I've started coming out now and the last couple of months, but still I'll get somebody that'll come up and, oh, hey, I know who you are, because I have this big mask on or whatever. So it's like, hey, hi. Okay. Yeah, I know who you are. And then they'll start talking wrestling to me. And I'm looking at them like a deer in headlights. And they're like, you don't remember when, Stephen J. Robinson did this in the first round of the 1987, 93, 4200. I'm like, I don't, I interviewed John last week. Know about that guy, right? And like, you don't know about that story? I'm like, I don't know about that story. And they're telling me. So it's cool. People keep doing that because I'm learning a lot. But to assume that I know because of the show is like, I don't. And I admit it to everybody. I'm not a wrestling guru. I'm learning. I've taken the bronze certified coach course. I went and did the leadership course at NWCA, and I'm trying to understand and do things to so I can be better when I get out there. But like I said, I mean, obviously my first love of wrestling is my children. I love to see them wrestle, but I, I'm so excited to go to bed because I want 7 o'clock to come quick because I'm going to the Danny Byron and I'm going to see my kids wrestle, but I'm going to get to see Tapia. I'm going to get to see Hines. I'm going to get to see Malguizo. I'm going to get to see Danny Martinez. I'm going to get to see Tristan Middlebrook, Brendan Abden. I can keep going if
Sure.
you like, but I'm going to get to see all these guys wrestle, and I'm so excited to go do it.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking it's like, yeah, I'm going to be going to Oak Leaf, after work tomorrow, and my concerns are probably a little more pedestrian, just making sure I get results when I leave, and can I read them? Do they have do they not do the score sheets not list the same kid at two different weights? And I think about those things, but I'm just as excited to go and be a part of stuff because there are times where I have to kind of be behind my computer and just do work that way. But it's really, for me, when I go to tournaments, I'm not working. To me, that's the fun part. When I go home, that's when my real work begins. So is on the drive home, and I start thinking about, writing the story that I'm going to writing the 10 or 15. Sometimes, I write stories about every tournament that has a team in my area. Last week, I wrote 14 stories on Sunday.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I called Jay, and I'll ask you. I don't know. You've been doing this for a very long time, so you probably learned how to multitask a long time ago. But I asked Jason Fulmore the other day when I was talking to him over the phone. I'm like, when you went and started taking photos, because now I'm behind a camera, right? So tomorrow I'm gonna have a camera with me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take some good pictures, but I find myself sometimes like this. The camera's here, and I'm supposed to be taking pictures, but I'm like, this match is so good. So I was like, I forgot that I should be taking pictures because I'm so enthralled in this matchup. And he goes, yeah, I've trained myself to watch it when I get home on track, watch it when I get home on flow, watch it when I get home on whatever. And I make sure I keep that camera up and I'm trying to get that shot. Because I was at Sunshine Duels and I was like, I'm watching like the Blade Sisters and I'm like, how can I take a picture here? I want to see wow, look at that, right? Where I'm watching these two little girls chase each other around, but they're wrestling like it's the best wrestling I've seen all day, and they're 10. But I'm like, wait a second, take a picture. At some point you're writing a story, but have you ever been there, like just so enthralled in the action that you forget that you're supposed to be taking notes?
Well, here's the thing. I worry less about the nuts and bolts of takedowns and how things are sort of progressing. And I sort of want to get lost in the match a bit. The ambiance of it. I want to feel what the crowd is feeling. I really feel like, especially since I started taking photos myself, I really didn't take a lot of photos myself prior to last year. And it really helps in situations like when I'm at state and I'm watching, he's now at college in Kentucky, a kid from the Panhandle, Gabe Jacobs, who to a state of 182. Or actually, he wrestled most of the year at 82. He wrestled state at 95, and he's just drilling everybody. And I'm like, and he goes out, and it's him and Middlebrook in the final, Lake Gibson last year. And I'm just like, okay, this is the end of the line. I want to capture, a season well spent, and it doesn't happen. And he's doing the same thing to Middlebrook that he's been doing all season. And I'm just like, because I don't get to see the Panhandle kids except, at the region tournament I might happen to be at and at state. And that's it. That's all I ever get to see them do. I've tried and tried. I wish I could figure out how to figure out the mechanics of running this coverage area that I have so that I could go and be at a tally tournament one weekend and be at a Panhandle tournament another weekend. It just hasn't really worked out so well because I've always had a child here at home that I got to deal with. But he goes out and he's drilling, and Middlebrook's this monster of a wrestler, and he's gonna, if he doesn't win state, I'll be shocked this year. But my guy from Pace is just hitting everything he wants to hit. And I'm shocked. I'm literally like looking over at the coaches. I saw myself stopping watching, all the near fall combinations he's putting Middlebrook through. And I'm looking over at the coaches, and they're just like, yeah, they're kind of looking at it like, this is what we trained to do. This is what we expected. And I'm just like, I'm wanting to jump out of my skin because, I remember Gabe Jacobs when he wrestled for a different school and he was a 106 pounder, and now he's wrestling 95 and just dominating everybody.
And Middlebrook's.
I love the surprises that the sport gives you all the time. It just
I got to watch Middlebrook wrestle. It was like one of the top 5 kids in the country was at Sunshine Duels, and they wrestled against each other. Now Middlebrook didn't win that one, but the fight that he put up was pretty awesome.
Oh, his athleticism is incredible. Like I said, I would be shocked if he doesn't.
Well, yeah, that's what I said about this kid. I know I'm going to mess up his name because I don't have it written down in front of me, but I think it was Patagliana at 190. He was 195, but he wrestled 220 last weekend, and he had to wrestle.
Petraglia?
Yes,
Rich?
he had to wrestle Middlebrook, Thompson, Arnold.
Yeah, the Palmetto Ridge kid. Yes.
How's that for a weekend?
That's a weekend. You've done something.
Yeah. That's the weekend. I asked Parsons. I go, hey, when a kid does that, does he move up in the rankings? Even though he went and lost 2-3, does he move up in the rankings? He goes, yeah, he'll move up in the rankings. I'm like, okay, I'm just checking because that's a tough go, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed yours and Brant's conversation that really sort of lays out the ranking process because, I've done it. I can do it. But for me, it's so difficult because I like doing rankings for the North that cover all 3 classes together. It's kind of like Brant's all class ranking where I will just, I don't want to have a 1A, 2A, 3A because then you just kind of end up slotting kids. Okay, where are they ranked on Brant's? Where are they ranked on, at one point it was Scout, and then another point it was Wrestling Nation, and now it's the Rockfin people. You can just slot people based on what they do. I always like the idea of trying to figure out how a Fleming kid and a kid from Bay High School in the Panhandle, where do they sit next to one another? Where does Creekside sit next to Clay? We actually found that out last night. Clay actually Creekside actually knocked Clay off last night. So
I like what Jason does, where he says, man, I'm not doing individual rankings. I like doing the team rankings. That keeps me a little more sane. But yeah,
I think I kind of gravitate to that too, for my own part. I love what Brant does, and nobody can do it like he does it. But it's something that for me is just, I would need the time because I know how much time Brant puts into it.
Yeah, as I said to him, I said, I just tried to break down like 2 tournaments and it was already crazy. But I mean, this thing, like, I mean, tomorrow all over the state, this weekend all over the state, there's so many big names out there. I mean, I'm looking here right now at like 106. You've got Jace Paradin in that bracket. You got Anderson Heap in that bracket. You're gonna have them in the 106 bracket. You got let's see what we got. We got Adrian Morales. No, he's at 113. But I mean, you just got so many good kids coming out. Number ones at 113. Number twos at
Yeah, I'm going to shout out for my guy Jace. He's only an 8th grader, and you know,
I had him on the
his
show.
resume
Great
is
kid.
massive. For he's gone over to Europe and wrestled, and he's competed in some really super high powered stuff that his dad has made the commitment to take him to, and you know. The only thing I think that last year was for him was that he was just undersized. He just wasn't long enough to deal with some of the high schoolers that were 106, particularly the ones that were like sophomores, juniors, where they start having that, man frame, but they're keeping themselves light. And Paradon is the 7th grader. He's still, not barely 13 years old.
Yeah, he was very fun on the show. I believe he's the young man that I met totally on accident. You may remember my show that I had with him. I was at the Grappler Fall Classic, and they had the way that Tony did it was he had like sections of 4, right? These mats, and this one section of 4 was all the young kids, right? And so I'm over there and I'm giving out these little Ward Wrestling Live pins, the kids that are getting pins and stuff. And his dad reached out and said, "You made his entire tournament by giving him that pin. He ran around all day with that pin. So happy that he got that pin." And I was like, "Bring him on. Let's do it. Let's talk." And we came on and we talked, and it was a good time. I believe I have spoken to him, but I believe that's the story.
Yeah, it's those surprises. It's just, it's not like any other sport. I mean, I've been a track parent. I've been a tennis player. I've covered every sport up north. They don't have lacrosse there, so I never covered lacrosse. But I've covered every sport. Otherwise, it's down here, and you just don't get the same level of. I mean, you'll occasionally get football players that are really into football, but because they kind of know, what their path is going to be, they want to go play high level in college and they have aspirations to play in the NFL. They kind of play their cards close to the vest with media people. The wrestlers don't do that. Wrestlers come off the mat. They, either they've had a great win or they had a really tough loss, but you need to interview them because they're in state finals and they come so close to the pinnacle and they just fell short. But they always bring the raw emotion, and it's just such a it's just an energy that I just I recycle all the time, and I need to, because what I do is a grind. It is really hard. It takes an awful lot of time to do, but thankfully the kids keep regenerating me every week. So I'm looking forward to going out this weekend. I'm not going to Danny Byron. I'm staying up here in the north. But I've got good tournaments to go to. We talked a little bit about the Peter girls tournament.
I mean, you see that I take pictures. You see, I take pictures now and I put them on my site. But I have a Smug Mug account, and then I link the Smug Mug to the site, whatever. But you're welcome if I'm at a tournament and you're looking at the pictures and one of your teams are at that tournament. You're welcome to scoop those photos for whatever you're doing up there. So.
Okay, cool. That'd be great.
Because there's teams like I don't know. I think it's the First Baptist Christian. Is that what they're called? First Baptist.
Yeah,
Christian?
yeah.
They were at the Tri-Duel the other night with my son in Masters Academy, and I took pictures. But I don't. I mean, I sent them to Mr. Cody and I sent them to my coach, but I don't even know how to get a hold of them.
Was that this week?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have a schedule for First Baptist, and I didn't know. I've been trying to get a schedule for them, so I did not get the results on those duels. So I'll be wanting to reach out to somebody on
Well,
that.
if you speak to those guys,
Work I got to go do now. Thanks, Dan.
yeah, ask them if they want their pictures, because I've got pictures. I just don't know where to send them.
Right.
And I didn't.
I have an email for you. I'll share it with you afterward.
When I do the big tournaments, I make those links public, and then I give a business card out. I kept this link private because it was just my kid's duel,
Right.
but I can, if I share the link, they have access to it, and it's free to pull the photos off. But as far as
Okay.
all my stuff, like Columbia was down at Brandon or at Lake Gibson. So, if you go on there, you're going to see photos of Columbia. I don't know those guys, but there's great photos on there. There's one of the coach down in the stands, and he's talking to the whole team, and they're all crowded in on him. I've got some of them resting or getting ready, preparing. They're all welcome to them. They're free, you just download them. So, but feel free
Okay.
to rip any of those.
Yeah, what you're doing is really great because that visual component is really something that is valuable and needed. I mean, I think Brant and I would both probably agree we're much more comfortable with written words and writing about people. So to have the video component that you're doing, whether it's photos or it's video, being on site and if you ever get to the point where you're doing like live remotes and doing interviews on site at state or whatever, that's only going to help the visibility of the sport.
I want to.
I've done a lot in a very short time, and you ought to be.
It's just a matter of, and I've been prodding Brant for 7 months, 6 months to come on. I finally got him on, and I just feel like it's going to be so much. I think it's going to be better for him to be on my show and in the public's view. But also, my goal with the first show was, I mean, I don't have to introduce who Brant Parsons is. You know who he is, but I don't think a lot of what I always hear was a lot of what I asked him, right? So he's laid that out as a foundation. But now, also, I'm able to say to kids and coaches when I'm out and about, I'm getting the questions, hey, send them your stuff. When we're on the show, now he's real to these kids, right? Oh, there he is, right? Oh, I myself can send him my stuff. Like he said on there, I don't care who sends it to me. If you're complaining or you're upset because you don't see your wins and losses, that's because I never got them. Like, I don't know that you beat that kid because I never saw that you did. So I'm hoping that if I can continue to do a weekly show through states, I'm hoping that he gets more information. He gets.
Well, I agree with all of that. So long as you take a minute or so, 30 seconds or so, and you bash Arsenal, you need to do that because, he's got to, especially the teams of the 90s, because, two things that he will go on a rant about how amazing his teams are is Ohio State and why they should be in the playoff, and I'm still not 100% convinced about that. And two, bash Arsenal a little bit. Just kind of make, deflate his head a little bit. It's good for him.
Well, I think the national championship with Maurice Claret, I think they paid the refs off when they beat my Miami Hurricanes. I think that was a total.
I'm not a U guy. I'm not a U fan 100%. I love Ed Reed. Ed Reed's my favorite football player of all time. But
that was pure robbery.
Horse bleed. Let me tell you.
Pure robbery. However,
absolutely.
Those two teams that year, I think they're all going to be in the Hall of Fame that went to the NFL. But hey, this is great, man. I'm so glad I got to meet you. I always hear really good things. And I remember when I first started coming on and somebody said to me, do you share stuff on that north side? I'm like, oh, no. That guy, I've never met him, but I know that he doesn't want me doing that, right? As far as a certain stuff, right? And they're like, oh, stop. Shannon Heaton, he's one of the sweetest guys you'll ever meet. He's cool. He just keeps his stuff kind of in its place.
Well, I appreciate that to some extent. I'm prickly personality wise. Ask some parents. And I do keep things a little close to the vest because I want North Florida Matmen to be about North Florida. And I don't want it to be about Iowa versus Penn State, even though I know a lot of fans want to talk about that meet. I would like to talk about that meet and how Iowa's going to beat Penn State this year again. But that's not what my site's about. My site's about the kids at Jacksonville Paxson and Clay and Fernandina Beach and Fort Walton Beach and Wakulla. And, you know, it's about them. And that's all I really try to do, is that I just want to make sure that they're always first on the site and on the Facebook group.
Yeah, and I had to be regulated.
Even though I think a lot of them, even though I think a lot of them would gain a lot from a Jordan Oliver, workout session, they would. But it's just, I just want to be sure that it's just about the North.
Yeah, that's cool. And I've had to be regulated, because when I first did this, I was just looking for wrestling groups just to get it out there, right? And
sure,
some of
different missions.
Some of these groups are like, even, like a Largo or a specific Harmony or a specific Celebrate, right? A lot of these places will say, look, this is just for the parents, so don't post it there, right? Post it here, right? And so I get it, but I didn't know at first. I was just literally littering everything. Even one of the women's wrestling pages was like, hey, you can post all the women's stuff you want, but we don't need the other stuff. I'm like, I got it. So it's good. I needed to be taught what I can't do, where the boundaries are, what I can post, what I can't post, and I'm still learning. And hopefully.
So are we all. So say we all.
Hopefully I don't
I
have
hope
to.
it never stops.
Yeah, me either. And I'm excited to go to bed, and hopefully I'll wake up tomorrow morning. That'll be a good thing. And then I'll get off to watch some great wrestling.
Well, enjoy it. I still got work to do yet tonight. I got a couple more hours of record keeping to do. I got some stuff I've got to get toward.
Nice. Well, I'll try and make it a point to get some Fleming Island pictures for you this weekend.
Okay, that'd be great. Awesome.
All right, boss. Thank you so much for coming on.
Dan, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.